Last year, notable photographer Jack Alterman was successful with his Eastside Matters project. Now he's back with the 500 block of King Street. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, he speaks exclusively to me one-on-one. You know, the last time we spoke, and this was off camera, but you basically told me that you had really trouble getting some people to participate in your current project. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, what took those people to say yes to the 500 block of King Street?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I went sort of door to door, some of the folks I knew, there was no problem at all. They said, "Oh, sure," you know. And then they asked me, "So what are you going to do with them?" And I said, "I'm going to make a beautiful portrait of you in your store,
yes,
using the light that comes in from the windows with no artificial lighting, and just an old-fashioned type of portrait, but a beautiful one.
Yeah.
And I want to put them up somewhere on King Street." I didn't know where it was going to be. Mm. Again, this was an organic project to see what I ended up with. And so after a few weeks, a couple of months, I ended up with, you know, one end of the street to the other, about 35 different stores represented, you know. And what the tipping point in this was that when Morris Sokol's building sold in December, I said, "Oh my gosh, there's a place to put these photographs," because there aren't any galleries up there right now. Venues are very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
When you think about, oh, I've got an art project, but then what do you do with it?
Yeah.
You know, you put it online. There's a lot of other, you know, venues like that, but not in a gallery. It's not the right place. So what I do is I photograph people and then put them back into the proximity of wherever it was I photographed them. In this case, right on the street.
Right.
On the east side, it was right on the street, right?
Yeah.
That's what made it, right? Because I photographed them sort of out of context.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you put them as a group, the gallery is the street, and it's like a sidewalk gallery. Yeah. I love that.
That's awesome.
So I asked Mr. Sokol, who I then photographed him, his wife, his daughter, his in-law, and some of the workers. Mm. And I shot them in the actual building when it was totally empty. So the light was coming in through the glass from King Street, and it afforded me a lot of different backdrops, but with that lighting.
Oh, yeah.
So then I said to Joe Sokol, I said, "Well, what's the possibility now that it's been sold that I could use this place as a pop-up temporary gallery during Piccolo's play?"
Yes.
And he said, "Well, I can't say anymore because of the new owner."
Oh.
And he pointed in the direction of a man crossing the street, and he said, "That's Mike over there. Ask Mike, he's the new owner."
Oh.
And I said, "That's Mike, sure." And I said, "I know Mike very well. I mean, he's a local guy." And I said, "He's now at least one of the owners of this building." I said, "Great." So I went over, walked down the street until I found him, and then I asked him, I said, "Mike, is it okay if I use the building in some way, shape, or form?" He said, "I'll get permission, you know, with the partners."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, in the meantime, I'd like to photograph you, because since you're the new guy, this shows the transition of that particular building." So I did, got a wonderful photograph of him in his office, which is also on the 500 block, aside from the Morris Sokol. So that's how it sort of built momentum. And one after another, I went into George's pawn shop. Wonderful people. The man who founded that is now almost 100 years old.
Wow.
He'll be 100 in December.
Wow.
He goes to work every day.
Wow.
Still goes in there, and his two sons are helping him with that. And of course, across the street, there's Mr. Kirstein, Sam Kirstein, who's been there since 1946 and still working. Dixie Furniture. And then there's Dell from Dell's Deli.
Right.
To find out that her husband is the chef, or ex-husband is the chef from Midtown. So I've got both of them.
Right.
So, you know, the two ladies, two young women who started the hot yoga place there. And so I love the idea that I'm finding people who had been there for generations, some people in their almost 100 years old, and other people who are in their 20s and doing their entrepreneurial, you know, business.
Sure.
So that's how it ended up. So I ended up with selecting about 30. I have room on that glass on the front of Morris Sokol, just doing the math, for 33 photographs, each one being 3 feet wide. And so we have about 100 feet. And they're going to be adhered to the front of the glass. So the next step for me is to go over there and do a power wash of the glass. And then with a little help, I'll go in the store, lay out all these photographs, and then one by one place them wherever I want to. And along with that will be a statement from me printed on the window that sort of gives you my reason for doing it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
And you know, you mentioned the high profile people that you actually took photos of. I'm wondering, as we sit here right now, who was your favorite and why?
I don't know, it's hard to say favorite, but the most, interesting person on there was Doris Dixon.
Oh yeah.
And Doris runs, Reeves and Brothers Shoe Repair. And I think it's 536 King Street. And I went in there, she first said, no, I don't want my picture taken. I've had my picture taken so many times because the Post and Courier and City Paper have done articles on her. And she's been there since the 80s. And the interesting thing about Doris, she's a wonderful person to be around. She's a very tiny little person. She's 4'8" or 9, maybe 10. She is in her mid-80s. And she's just delightful to talk to, and it's like stepping back in time going in there. So we would share stories about things we remembered, or she would remind me of a lot of things. And finally, after about 6 times going in there, she let me take a picture.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And so we had great fun. She loved it. And but then you hear little backstories, okay? Because down the road, I photographed 2 of the Altman boys, they'll call them. So Sam Altman and his brother Charles run they have an attorney, a firm in the Altman's building, which used to be a furniture store.
That's right.
Right. And so they own the building that Doris is in. And their father, his name was Israel Altman. And he said, just before he died, to his son, he said, there's a couple of the tenants in our buildings there that I feel very strongly about, and Doris is one of them. And for as long as she can stay there, for as long as she wants to, with no rent increases. And so that was his word on that, and that's what they did. And it's a wonderful story to think about a neighborhood, a commercial neighborhood, where you have a landlord that's renting to another business and cares enough for the person doing that to say to them, I know that this is going to happen. I know that it's going to be gentrified in some way, and I want to protect her, that she can stay there as long as she wants. And he did the same thing with Bob Hines, with Hines Glass Studio.
Right.
Okay, so the change is here now, and the hotels are coming up, and the Hines Studio has been displaced, and he moved into a building that he happened to own, thank goodness for him, just up the street. So this is what's happening, and it's just sort of a historic moment for our city.
And you mentioned the hotels going up and the cranes going up. I have to ask, and you've been down there for a while, you've seen change down there. Can you take me back 30 years ago to right now? Because I want to know what sticks out in your mind when you think of the 500 block of King Street.
Yeah. Well, going back 30 years, I can think about it, up until 1994, it's hard to remember this, but it used to be a one-way street, and it went north. So when you got onto Calhoun Street, if you wanted to get on King, you had to go that direction. And that was established back, I believe, in the 50s, and they wanted to do that so it would increase the flow of traffic. But what it did, it adversely affected business up there. And so people couldn't get to these stores so easily. Morisoko, for instance, they said when they reversed the lane back to 2A, that their business surged after that. It was a big deal. And they also put parking on the street. So the way you see it now has only been around for the last 25 years. So I remember that. I remember before that when it was one way. And it was absolutely a bad neighborhood up there. Hurricane Hugo just sealed the fate of that area in 1989. And the occupancy rate dropped down to, it was very low, it was like maybe 35–40%. And it used to be 10 years before that, it was 80 or 90%. So now you see what's happened again. Not only the two ways again, we've got a new hotel to anchor that end of the street, and so much more coming. So it's a whole new era for that area.
So let's recreate the scene. You were at the Charleston County Library on Monday night to basically unveil your 500 block of King Street project.
Right.
And I'm wondering, what was it like to be Jack Alterman on that night?
What I did was I tried to evaluate the audience. The audience in that case were photographers and, photography enthusiasts, really. And so what they're interested was also not just in the project, but also in the technical aspect of it. So basically I kind of wove that in a little bit, because they kind of expect that. And one of the other topics was, how do you find a venue? I mean, before they saw what I was doing, they asked, we have photographs we'd love to display somewhere, but there's nowhere to do it. And so I think I came up with an idea for them that they didn't expect. And that was, on the street, out in the open outdoors, and it's something outside of an organized gallery space. And so I kind of walk my process through this while I'm explaining about who these people are that I photographed and where. I also told them, well, I use natural window light, and I would talk them through it to get the right expressions on their faces, to sort of avoid big smiles, to try to get more of an emotional response from them, and just to create a beautiful photograph. And then I told them, well, where would be the most appropriate place to display them? So the Marshall building, which is just sold, is now empty, and I got permission from the new owner to display these either inside or out, and I chose to do them on the outside of the window because of reflections and so forth. So I picked a display material that will adhere itself to the glass, and I'm hoping for the best on that one.
And speaking of which, as you know, May 27th and June 12th is the Piccolo Splitter Festival, and your project will be involved with that as well. And I'm wondering, this is a crazy question, what does that mean to you as far as having your project involved with Piccolo Splitter?
Yeah, well, Piccolo Splitter is a community-based event, and I am a local Charlestonian, and I'm a photographer, and I use my work artfully, and I think that sharing that with the community is very important to me and to the community, to tell the stories of people who live here, what they see, and how they interpret that, as artists especially. That's what the festival is all about. And so, Piccolo is a regionally fueled and based event, whereas Spoleto is a much more global one, right? So it's important, if I've got something like this to contribute, then I think I should do it.
Yeah. Let me take you back to the future, because when we talked on King Street a few months ago, you actually told me that you want to do, I guess, part 2 or part 3 of Eastside Matters.
Right.
And when you look into your crystal ball, what do you see for that particular project?
Yeah, and so there's more I could do on the east side, but then walking down the street and across the street and doing this 500 block on King Street, I realized there are other neighborhoods too, like both of them. This is basically a gentrification story. The east side is more of a residential neighborhood, whereas of course King Street is commercial. So what about other areas? The west side of town, west of the Ashley, parts of North Charleston at some point. I think, somebody in Detroit would see this happening in their own backyard, but this is Charleston, this is my backyard. And this is what gives me this opportunity. I don't think people can do it unless they're here every day. You've got to pick the chances that come along, the opportunity to walk down the street and by chance find somebody that you're talking to, photograph them, tell a little bit of their story, and then put them together with other people, with other scenarios like that.
Wow.
And when you get them all together, you got a story. But the story, we know the history right now of King Street. It started right after the Civil War was say it got to be a productive commercial area, and then died out in the 30s, picked back up again in the 40s, again went down in the 60s, and now it's booming, you know. So, what we don't know are the stories of the people who've been there through all of that.
Wow.
And I'm not here to be the historian that's talking about individual history, but just to bring up a name, and like it's Sokol, or it's Kirstein, or it's so many others up there, new ones, that were here for the past 100 years and saw all these ups and downs. And now, before long, it's inevitable that somebody will replace them, you know? So the gentrification is different. It's about a lot more money moving in to buy businesses that were already kind of successful. But now it's going to be another generation of that, you know, and it's not going to be a family generation. It's going to be people from away, or much younger, you know, more visionary type person who comes in to take over and move forward in history.
Wow. Well, Jack Alterman, I thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I appreciate that.
Anytime.
Thank you. I appreciate it.